without that little jog, would they be able to put the roads within their development wherever they wanted?
That would require an amendment to the form-based code.
Which could happen.
It could happen.
Could happen,
It
but-
does involve a
But they are-
process.
But it would be a
we
lengthy
would be
process,
involved
and
as a
certainly,
community.
certainly you would be involved.
So, right now, where the roads are in the form-based code is where the
Right.
roads must be.
Right.
And that little gray thing was an alley, so it wouldn't, if you
Yeah.
go back
Yeah.
to the blue.
Yes.
An alley to provide access. But then that alley is,
Yeah.
There.
yeah,
Yeah.
that alley as shown goes through the existing building, so it's, how likely is it that they tear down that existing building rather than build around it?
Yeah, but if they did, they would have to go through the county, through the community
Yes,
to get an
to
amendment to make
yes.
that road go straight through.
Right, right.
So the proposed road that goes out to Columbia Pike, will there be a light there?
Don't know at this time. We'd have to do traffic analysis and see.
And also, I'd just like to point out, and Kirsten pointed this out to me a couple of years ago, if there's an emergency, like on September 11th, when traffic all backed up on Columbia Pike, we could not get out. And so that's just something we need to keep in mind, is that we need a safety net so that we can get out, that we have another option. So it's just something to keep in mind. That street might never happen, but we, in the future, and Kirsten pointed this out, for the extension of Queen Street for the emergency vehicles, she said we really do need another way out of here. And so that's just something to keep in mind.
And a follow-on to that, though, my recommendation or my suggestion has always been, make it out only.
Yes, exactly.
Not two ways. Make it, if it's truly a way for us to get out, another access point out of the neighborhood, because it's going to be easy to get into the neighborhood. We've got 3 routes in. We're going to have a new turning lane off of Columbia Pike. So if it really is that the benefits to us, if it really is just beneficial to us, it should be out only.
Okay. I think that was all we had to present. Jennifer, Jill?
Yeah, that's, we really wanted to just kind of look closely and do the follow-up with you. Jean, thank you for making accommodations for a second meeting this month. Again, clearly we didn't cover everything under the form-based code. You've got Jean, some of the rest of you have been following it closely. So I would imagine that you'll continue to kind of go home and take a look at some of the additional revisions in the revised draft, and you may have some comments once you get the final draft out, and there'll be opportunities for review and comment period, and whether that's through the form-based code working group or participating in a public hearing with either some of the other commissions or ultimately the county board.
You mentioned something that's sort of, you say final draft. What does that mean?
Well, so we've done 2 drafts, and we're going to prepare what we're calling the final draft. And what we had thought would be the draft that was going ready for advertisement.
Okay.
Now,
But
we're
still-
in a little bit of a wiggle room here in that when I say final draft, there could be some additional comments that we're going to get through those final meetings in September. And there could be some things that we hear before we get to the advertisement, because from a zoning perspective, what has to be advertised, we have to give public notice on what's being advertised. So there's very little changes that could be made from the advertisement to the adoption. And if we had to make big changes, we would probably have to advertise again. So when you get something in September, we say it's final draft, there could be a few changes before we get to the very final.
Okay. The other question is, once this home base is complete and passes the county and whatnot, does that mean that's the way it's gonna happen? In other words, if I'm a builder and I don't wanna go form-based code,
And you want to use
Do
the
it site.
form-based code, then
I
once.
don't wanna use it.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna
The
fight for
form-based
site.
code is not your only option. You still have your by right zoning
Okay.
regulations. I don't have any way to stop an applicant from submitting a site plan proposal, but it wouldn't, we've said in the past that we were steering people towards the form-based code. as
I
the
just
choice.
wanted to make that clear to you.
Yeah, it's an optional tool, and the property owners still retain their by right zoning.
I have a question for Matt about parking. When you showed us a potential to have a detached garage for each unit, do you count the garage spaces as part of that 1 1/8, or is the 1 1/8 just surface parking?
Yeah, if I could just. So, looking at Carver, basically what's happening is the detached garages, which I believe in this case were basically two-car garages, they count as the reserved ratio for these units. What's also happening is you're creating 2 new streets that weren't there before, and each one on both sides is going to have opportunities for on-street parking. Most likely, those opportunities will be counted towards the shared requirement. So that 1/8 ratio that every unit has to contribute, those will be located in these instances. Or, there's some potential here where you have kind of leftover space. Likely you wouldn't fit in an extra unit there. So that's kind of like a prime spot for some additional surface parking. So with regards to the overall parking picture for Carver, this is how we envision it parks itself, in that you have new on-street spaces that count towards their requirement, because those spaces weren't there before. You have the 2-car garages in some cases, and then you have surface parking as well.
Okay, so if there's a 2-car garage for each unit, then that exceeds the 1 1/8 requirement. Okay.
But not all would have that. It all depends how you lay it out, and this is just one way.
I see.
But it all has to work within those streets.
Yeah.
Right, some things are fixed. Your district boundary is fixed, where the streets are located and the building lines. Your buildings have to front along certain lines here. You have to provide the mini park. You have to have alleys, so the buildings don't go exactly to the district line. You have to have the private open space for all the units. So there's a lot of parameters that are always going to be there. Some are visually already prescribed to you in the regulating plan. Some are more in text and graphics, where you have some flexibility in how you meet that requirement. Yes.
What are these little small buildings in between, in between the big buildings?
The garages.
This is really that. So the detached garage, this is your 3-story townhouse. We're looking at the back of it. 3-story townhouse, there's a gap.
Yeah,
That's your private open space, and there's your garage. In this case, one way of doing it, we're showing how we can utilize the available space on top of the garage. Sometimes it might be just a garage.
oh, okay.
So you don't have to build a detached garage, but it's an option. And the code also would allow you to build what we call a side wing, which, would be the connector between the primary building and if you had a detached garage. There's limitations. It wouldn't be able to, that side wing is only on one side.
Some of that is illustrated in some of the graphics we have in the building envelope standards. So you can kind of see where the actual townhouse section is there. That's a connector piece. This is your private open space and garage space before you get to the back of your site. So again, very prescriptive, not a lot of room for, different ways that we can get something built like that. So we have a good predictability in that. But there is still some flexibility built in terms of how they fit what they want to fit. Yes?
Just a quick, I forget with respect to the plan, but what Carrington Village, what was the height of the building or buildings that can be placed there?
It's
Carrington Village.
3 and then 2. So the darker orange color,
Yeah.
that's 3, and then the yellow on the edge along Queen is 2. That's a detached, your duplex type house.
Just so when it comes back out to Queen, that it really fit in with the single family at the neighborhood edge.
Not a high-rise apartment building, correct?
How
We
economic
couldn't sneak that in.
feasible is a redevelopment of a 3-level dwelling there.
Again, we're not taking anything away, we're just providing another opportunity for them to redevelop. In our modeling, the assumption was that even if they took advantage of the form-based code, we wouldn't anticipate any additional density beyond what's there now, just because they're already, 2 to 3 stories. We're not giving them anything extra, so.
So it's not gonna happen. They're all individually owned, so.
You know what, it
it's
depends
kind of-
how you can lay that site out and still meet all the requirements. Maybe there is a way, but I think we put enough parameters to control it. You gonna say something?
In your sketch, did you assume that some townhouses had the detached garage and then some might have parking, like the tuck under within the
Yes.
main building?
I believe
So
these
directly
did.
from the alley?
Yeah, I believe these had the tucked, and then these, I think in this scenario with the affordable units, because I think you're only gaining, in our scenario, 20, 25 maybe, extra units than what's there now. So your requirement basically was lower. I think it was only like 4 units that had to be affordable. So their parking was basically here. But yeah, this kind of attempts to model a couple different types of townhouses that could exist. Yes.
The matrix that you've been referring back to with the requirements and the stories and all that, that chart is in the form-based code document?
This?
No.
No.
It is not?
No, this was back a year ago, basically. You all gave us a letter that outlined a bunch of conditions. Those conditions were incorporated into the staff report. So that's really instead of the form-based code, it's been officially, incorporated as part of the staff report. So we can send you the links. When you click on that document on pages 25 to 26, there's a whole section of how we're addressing, basically word for word what's in that letter. All those different things that we outline are covered here on the next page. So some of it, you'll probably find instances in the neighborhoods plan, but really in the staff report is where we said, here's what happened, we had a couple meetings, you guys gave us a letter, here's how we're addressing it, and as we go further with the code, we're going to come back and do a lot of these analysis.
Is there a way we can get that matrix into the form-based code document? Because I think that part of my understanding of the form-based code is that it's something that a developer can look at and have a checkbox type document in front of them that they can say, oh, what can I do here? Oh, townhouse only. So to have a visual matrix of what they can do instead of having to pick through, and I know personally for me, it would make me feel a lot better to see a little box that has all of our check marks. I don't know how other people
And I
feel
understand
about
what you're saying. The reality is that that's actually already in the plan. There's been specific notes on the maps, text, and the illustrations that we have in different parts of the code that actually reflect a lot of this here. The reason why it's difficult is because the code is structured such that a lot of the regulations apply to multiple sites along Columbia Pike. So Carver actually, in my opinion, I think has the most amount of unique regulations compared to any other site, because we're not asking for those type of limitations. There aren't any special notes that dictate and reflect what the agreement was. A lot of these, and really the first half of the presentation, was to kind of show you how we're really getting there, but stopping short of having the actual table in there.
Why stop short?
It really wouldn't be applicable for zoning language. We've already covered the form, the heights, this one special density through an appropriate method in the zoning itself. And that kind of snapshot really isn't appropriate for zoning language. So one of the things that I think the feedback that we'll take into is there a way that we can capture this reporting to the board as part of our staff report? That would be a way of record keeping as well.
So then, particularly in the Arlington View Terrace, where it's coded, the building envelope standard is coded urban residential, and you've got a little 4 after it. Is there anywhere within the document that defines what that 4 means?
Yes, that's something we're working on in the legend. This is not the only location where there would be special notation on the map like that. We know that that's what's intended there, but we are working to make that better, the graphics work better. There's a similar kind of note at the urban mixed use, which is another orange color that you're not seeing on this exhibit, at the Foxcroft Heights area, where the height limit for that is not up to the maximum of 6. It's at a maximum of 5, so there's a similar note there. And again, this is really stemming from the neighborhoods plan. So we do have some of those policy documents in place, and again, we'll go back and look at how we can do this follow-up and reporting through some other documentation.
And I think from a clarity standpoint, if, we continue to, refine this and there's still some questions, like, I'm not sure if I was a developer, I would know that is supposed to be 4 stories. What always happens, regardless of how clear this is or not, just visually, I mean, the word is there, whether you find it or not, debatable. Your first meeting with county staff, and developers are going to come in before they have a whole project constructed or, a detailed set of plans. They're going to come in with some concepts, and the first thing we're going to flag is, you didn't see that 4. That has to be 4. Come back and give us a revised plan that is true to what's on there. So a lot of times, that's the first thing we catch when somebody comes in that's interested in a site. We make sure that they're interpreting the code properly, and if there's any kind of issues they have to clear up, it's in their best interest to get that, clarified up front before they start pursuing, more detailed drawings.
Which is why I would think that matrix is helpful, but.
That's a good point.
Can you go back to your plat?
This one?
Yeah, have you counted up, how many units are reflected in your plat with the placement of your roads?
I don't think it's more than 50. Somewhere in the 40s, I think. There's
Okay,
one
so
way of
that's
doing it.
significant, if the roads dictate outcomes, you've severely limited what a developer can do in there. I'm just looking forward, that kind of, and that constrains what can happen there, and it can dictate maybe bad outcomes. So is it that rigid a rule, that those roads have to be exactly as placed?
Roads can shift a little bit. We have room for that. You can go a couple of feet. Again, this is only using a certain size. One of the things we looked at in the additional slide, as we look at the final draft, one of the things we're considering whether or not for a portion of townhouses on any given site, can they go down to just 16 feet wide? We've seen a lot of successful models that work, have been built that way. Maybe there's, going back to the flexibility and making a site still feasible, can some of these be reduced to 16 instead of 18? I think these are 20 right now. Are you able to fit, one more in that whole stick? And, look for that as well. Is there solutions with parking and, how you orient? Because, there's a building edge here and a building edge here. These happen to be going east-west. Can you do something with the orientation that helps you gain some units? So there are certain things built in for flexibility, but something like the park, for example, that has to be respected.
So the code sets the street locations. In this code, we do allow for streets to have the flexibility to shift up to 25 feet in either direction. If they would request anything more than that, that would automatically go to the county board for review as a modification, and that would take additional process and have additional review. But by and large, the regulating plan is the guiding zoning document and is going to say where your fronts of buildings are, how you're going to address the street, and that it's going to require, in this instance, we've got an L-shaped road and a new park. So I think that if somebody chooses to use the form-based code for this site over following the by right zoning, that we would be looking to see something similar in nature.
Yes.
Last question. What if these 3 areas, as they were, and maximum capacity parking, have you modeled that out, the impact of the parking, what they used to be and what they will be at max parking?
So you're asking for the 3 sites that are eligible for the
At
form-based
max.
code,
At
how many spaces they have now?
125, yeah.
Okay, versus how much they would provide.
At max, what would the maximum parking be?
We can pretty quickly do
The
that fast.
maximum impact on the neighborhood?
I'm not sure how many
The only
spaces
one-
are in here.
Yeah.
Here,
So the only one that we would really be able to give you a firm number on. If Carver, because we have a density limit for Carver at 80 units. So whoever's got the calculator to do 80 units times 1 and then 8 space, and that would be what would be required there. Now, the Carrington and the Arlington View Terrace, just like everywhere else in the form-based code, it is a form-driven that establishes basically the
Why
envelope.
can't you do it for all of them?
Because the form-based code doesn't set a density limit for those. Now, we've made some assumptions about what a hypothetical set of units may be, and Matt gave you the estimate for, I think it was 90 units
For
at
Arlington View?
Arlington View.
Yeah, like
And was
93.
that was an increase, or was that the total?
That was the net
number?
change, 93 new units.
Right.
But again, there's multiple ways of orienting your building, how many wings you have. We only know how high they're gonna be and where the building's gonna start, because that's where your street is, and your building face has to.
But I think the takeaway is each site under the form-based code has to accommodate its parking on site. Now, if they create some new street spaces that aren't there today, they can count those spaces towards their requirement. And typically, the county doesn't restrict street spaces for resident A or resident B. So those could be your visitor parking spaces. But each site has to accommodate its parking on its own. And the 1 1/8 is a county standard for this area. Close-in neighborhood, accessible to transit, good sidewalks, and bicycle connections.
Every neighborhood worries about parking, because when you get ready to go to work in the morning, you want to be able to pull out of your driveway and hit the corner.